get this. Okay, thank you. And my name is Holly Mosher, and I'm running the Why Do You Vote social action campaign. And we are a get out the youth vote, but also just get out the vote in general campaign, focusing on 7 issues that most Americans actually agree upon. And the idea of the coffee chats is to come together to connect, empower, and engage. And when we say connection, instead of just sharing everything here on the chat, we have a spreadsheet, which I'm gonna just, I just shared in the chat so that you guys, we can all stay connected and learn more. So if you have resources you want to share, please put them in the spreadsheet. And first, if I'd like to invite anybody to just come on for a few seconds, say your name and where you're from, and if you know that like if you're a intro to this topic of election security, or if you've been in this a long time. So anybody who wants to share. Okay,
yeah.
Barbara Benjamin.
Hi.
Yes.
I'm Barbara Benjamin Trevino, be a voter, and I'm not in LA. I'm not sure where probably many of you are. I'm in something called Georgetown, Texas, which is just above Austin in Williamson County. And Holly and I met on Instagram, I guess it is, right?
Yeah.
And have been partnering. I'm specifically interested and working on youth voter turnout, 18 to 29-year-olds, especially college students. And my big thing is the voting action plan, which is on Why Do You Vote site already. So nice to meet all of you.
Thank you, Barbara. Does anybody else want to share what brought them here?
I'll jump in. Hi, Holly. Good
Hi.
to see.
Great to see you.
I'm Nina Strike. I am the founder and festival director of the Global Peace Film Festival that takes place in Central Florida in September. And we use the festival as a vehicle to register young voters. Our average attendance age, we have 40% of our attendance is under the age of 35, which is unusual for a film festival. So we partner with a lot of local organizations from the League of Women Voters in Florida. There's a referendum on the ballot about to put abortion in the state constitution, legalized abortion in the state constitution. So ideal for getting young voters out.
Fantastic. And Nina, please share all your info in the spreadsheet.
Okay.
Anybody else want to share why they're here and what their amazing voting stuff they're working on?
I'll mention I'm Lisa Liddell. I'm in Northern California, actually Los Gatos, and know Holly through women with our network WDN, and working to do whatever we can to get the voters out, mobilizing voters who are on the sidelines or young voters. I'm really focused on 2 different efforts. One is Democratic Messaging Project, which is going above the media algorithm to get the word out about what the Democrats have done and what they're going to be able to do. We get a trifecta. If we can vote blue down the ballot, we're using rolling billboards in the 4 battleground states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. And we're doing static billboards, about 7 in each of those states. We have condoms that we're distributing on college campuses that say, protect yourself from Republicans, vote Democrat, with a scan code that takes them to all the voting information they need. We have another round of packaging for condoms, which is much more bold, saying, protect your fucking freedoms. Just laying it out there, that will go for we're hoping. But I'm also working on another project, which is called the Young Men Research Initiative. And we're doing as much as we can to gather the research that has been done on men, young men 18 to 34 years old, and why they're going more conservatively, and looking at the masculinity of the Republican Party and how to help young men understand what the Democrats represent and how it's very good for them, and they need to come back and try to reduce that gender gap. this will go on past the election, but we'll be doing our own focus groups shortly. We're just starting to bring in some funding, and we've done 3 briefings. The last one was very well attended, about third-party candidates and how that's very attractive to young people. So if you want any information, I'll put my email in the chat, and I think that the resources are in the Google Doc. So thank you, Holly, for having these weekly chats. It's a great.
Yes, and put whatever info in this,
Hello, I'm on County Mayor Jerry Dimpkins. It is my pleasure to welcome you.
Sorry.
Oh, I was like, is that somebody joining? Okay. Does anybody else want to share? We have a few more amazing people working on this issue that are not featured speakers, but you can also join afterwards. We could go either way. We could go ahead with our programming, but if you want to speak up now, please do.
Hi, I'm Chris Bystroff. I'm loosely associated with Smart Elections and League of Women Voters, and I'm here to try to connect with anybody interested in organizing post-election audits.
Oh, fantastic, Chris. Please enter your info in that shared spreadsheet. I'll share it again, just so everybody has it. Anyone else? Okay, well, we can always connect more in the second half. The idea is to do the first half hour, get the featured speakers to talk 5 minutes about what they're doing, and then if people can stay for the second half of the call, the full hour, we can go much deeper. So we can all talk further then. So without further ado, I would love to start with Barbara Simons with all of her amazing work at Verified Voting.
Thank you, Holly. So I'm hopefully going to succeed in sharing my screen.
Yes.
Wait, where is it? Can you
Yep. We can
see it now?
Yep.
All right, let's do play. All right, so first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. And it sounds like there's some really interesting work being done by everybody here. I just thought I'd talk a little bit about my experience with basically over the past 2 decades fighting the insecure use of computers in voting technology. One of the reasons I think we're all here is that computers were introduced into voting on a widespread basis without adequate protections. So my particular introduction was when I was asked to participate on a panel on internet voting back actually in 1999 that President Clinton was interested in. I went into that panel thinking that internet voting was a really cool idea. And I left it thinking it's a god-awful idea and we shouldn't do it. All the reasons that I felt it was a problem then are even more serious now. The security issues are greater. We know that our elections are being attacked by hostile nation states, and we have to worry about domestic partisans. So this basically started back with the passage of the Help America Vote Act in 2002 in response to Florida 2000. I'm sure, I mean, young folks on this call may not remember, but we old timers remember the punch card ballots and how there were these hanging chads and pregnant chads and all this other nonsense. I mean, that was really bad design for a voting machine. But unfortunately, the conclusion that a lot of people reached because of that was that paper was bad. And that was the absolutely wrong conclusion. So Help America Vote Act was passed. It provided almost $4 billion with a B dollars to modernize voting machines and to replace these punch card and lever machines with computer-based technologies. As I say, almost all the money was spent before there were any reasonable standards, and there was no risk analysis. I just thought I'd give a brief overview of the types of voting systems, voting machines. The ones that basically got me into this are called paperless direct recording electronic, DRE, direct recording electronic. That means that the results are stored in the memory of the computer and there is no paper, obviously. So there's nothing to do a recount. You have to trust the memory of the computer. And when computer scientists realized that people were going to do that with elections, we were dumbfounded. I mean, it's just appalling. Paper ballots, obviously, have been around for a long time. I mean, that's typically what we've used. Currently, paper ballots are counted by scanners almost everywhere. And scanners are computers. A lot of people don't realize that, but scanners are computers. So you have to also distrust the scanners, just as you would with the direct recording electronic machines. The best kind of paper ballots are hand-marked paper ballots, because the voter by definition validates the ballot when she marks it. There are also ballot marking devices that are computers that produce a paper ballot. You make a selection on the computer, prints out the ballot. These are important for voters with disabilities and others who can't use hand-marked paper ballots. Internet voting, of course, has been around for a while, where voted ballots are sent over the internet and there's no paper ballots. So as a result of Help America Vote Act, there was a gold rush mentality to purchase machines. Vendors, of course, stated they worked perfectly. There were no problems, but there was no independent security testing. There were no standards. I mean, it was really appalling. And even today, the security testing is not great. Election officials wanted to show voters that they had the latest and greatest because they just got all this money and they were very proud of these shiny new machines. And many purchased these paperless DREs. And when the computer scientists and other activists objected, we were called things like conspiracy theorists, fearmongers, and Luddites, which I found at the time particularly ironic, given that the people calling us Luddites didn't understand the technology. Verified voting was started 20 years ago because of the introduction of computers to voting by a Stanford computer scientist professor. I was on the first board. There were only 3 of us on the board, him, his wife, and me. We were incredibly naive at the time. And we just actually thought if we would explain to people why these DREs were a bad idea, these paperless DREs, they would say, oh, okay, you're right. We're not going to do this anymore. And we're still at it 20 years later. Verified voting works with election officials. We obtain, map, and share information about election technology and security. We partner with voting rights groups. And we lobby to get bad laws killed and good ones passed. Verified voting is a C3 and C4. So if you go to our website, verifiedvoting.org, all one word, verified voting, you can get information about voting technology used through all over the country, in your state and in your county, from 2006 to 2024, the types of machines. We also have information about, we have the names of the top state officials and the local election officials in the county, at the county level, and lots of other information like the number of registered voters, the number of precincts, the number of polling places in each state. So here's an example of the map. It's called the verifier. And I've just chosen 2 years because they're interesting contrast. 2006 and 2022. 2024 is not very different from 2022. If you look at 2006, you'll see there's a lot of red. All of those red states are paperless DREs, paperless direct recording electronics, the worst kind of voting machines possible. The dark purple is New York State, which had lever machines in 2006. And then if you look at 2022, there's a lot more green. The green is hand-marked paper ballots. So there's definitely been improvement from 2006 to 2022 in terms of the voting technology being used. But there's still a huge amount of work that we have to do. I will make one quick note, which is that Louisiana is still entirely paperless DREs. And I just don't trust anything coming out of Louisiana, quite frankly. If you look at Texas, it's got a lot of red still as well. And so does several other states.
And I want everybody to also look at Georgia, since we're going to hear from Marilyn Marks next. Just point that out before.
Georgia is entirely ballot marking devices. So they're not hand-marked paper ballots. And there's a whole history of Georgia. I'm going to mention a little bit about Georgia in another slide. In fact, right here.
Okay.
Georgia in 2002 purchased Diebold paperless DREs, and they used them for a statewide election, we know from experience that it's a bad idea to use a voting system for the first time in a major election, but this is what Georgia did. These are incredibly insecure machines, by the way. Senator Max Cleland and Governor Roy Barnes were both ahead in the polls before the election, and they both lost. We know there are last-minute changes made to the software with no oversight. And of course, there was no recount possible, not that they had any laws that would have required it, but it was not possible because there was no paper. So people often ask me, what are examples of elections that have been rigged? And it's essentially impossible to prove that an election has been rigged without having, it's very, very hard to do. But if somebody you know, if I were asked to name my top candidate for a rigged election, this would be it. In 2018, Alex Haldeman, a computer scientist at the University of Michigan, created a video for the New York Times, which I highly recommend, showing how to remotely hack these same exact machines. You don't even have to be there to change the results on these machines, on these Diebold paperless machines. These are the same machines that were used in the 2018 election, which Stacey Abrams lost. At the time, she encouraged mail-in ballots for her voters so that they would have paper, but still, the Diebold paperless machines were used at the polling places. And at 2020, the court ordered the state to get rid of these paperless machines, and the state, they weren't ordered to buy ballot marking devices, but that's what they bought. And Marilyn Marks is going to talk more about Georgia.
Right. And then for a time, because we can come back to this in the second part of the call, but I would like to now move to Marilyn Marks and Georgia to go into a deep dive on that and hear from
Okay.
her. So
let me stop sharing. I've got it here if I can. One of the things I didn't get to, which I hope we'll have a chance to talk about, is I don't know why. There we go.
Okay.
One of the things that I hope we'll have a chance to talk about is what the solutions are, how to run a secure election.
Yes, we will do that for sure in the second half. So next, let's hear from Marilyn and all that you've been doing. You've been working tirelessly on this issue in Georgia. So
well, can you hear me okay?
yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Holly. And I greatly appreciate being invited. And I certainly don't want to interrupt Barbara Simons. I mean, there's nothing I could say that it approaches being as important as what she has to say. I would say that we need about 10 more Barbara Simons to deal with the threats we have now in front of us here in the 21st century. And I want to talk about why we need a new age of activism, a new type of activism. I don't even have a name for it, but I wanted to point out that voter protection today, and there's so many people doing voter protection, which is needed for sure. For the most part, though, it is a 20th century model where people are trying to make sure that people can get to the ballot box. When we look at the most dangerous type of voter suppression, though, it can be through high-tech means. I want to give you a couple of examples, but the high-risk problem in voter suppression and election subversion is from cyber attacks, malicious programming, human errors in programming, misinformation about the electronic results, and all of the mystery that goes on in electronic voting, and it being so overly complex. Georgia's system is absolutely overly complex. How do I get to the next slide? It's not wanting me to do that. Okay. All right, there we go. We have, as Barbara said, a touchscreen system or a touchscreen to vote on. Then it prints a ballot. Then you have to put the ballot into the scanner. And of all things, that ballot is printed. The votes are encoded as a QR code. I don't know what the trick is. Sometimes this lets me move forward. Other times it doesn't.
Forward, yeah, it's adding the.
There we go. All right, here's a picture of it in a polling place. All right, but Georgia's voting system software, the entire state's software, has been stolen. It was stolen by Trump allies right after the 2020 election. We at Little Old Coalition for Good Governance found out about it because one of the lead perpetrators, this guy Scott Hall, called me and out of the blue started threatening me. I kept him on the phone for a long time, being sweet little old lady. And 50 minutes into the phone call, he admitted to me that he had led a group into Coffee County, Georgia, and stolen the software. Fast forward to ultimately, we got all of that information to Fonnie Willis. And Scott Hall, the guy who called me, was the first person to plead guilty in her big indictment that included Trump and 18 other co-conspirators. He was one of the co-conspirators. This is a video that we were finally able to obtain of the perpetrators in action in the Coffee County office, literally doing the theft.
The
of
newly
the
obtained
software.
surveillance.
Oops, sorry. All right. Anyway, Sidney Powell's people who was working with Scott Hall, their agents had access to every single thing in the voting system. This is them copying the election management system server. This is them working on the poll books and copying they were trying to copy every bit of private voter data in the poll books. This was, as far as we know, the largest ever voting system breach in the nation. They accessed all of the components, including the software that will be used in the 2024 election, which in this breach has not been mitigated. This unmitigated compromised software is going to be used in November. Not only was it compromised in Coffee County, the people who actually captured this software, Sullivan Strickler, put it on the internet in a ShareFile site. Cyber Ninjas helped put it on a virtual machine, and it was spread across the world. We have no idea how many good and bad actors have their hands on Georgia's software. All right, and so we are facing a unmitigated high-risk threat in Georgia, a swing state in 2024. Barbara mentioned the old DRE machines, the paperless machines. Our lawsuit in Georgia had those declared unconstitutional. The state got rid of them, but didn't improve much when they got rid of them under court order, but did not improve much when they bought the touchscreen machines. Barbara nominated the 2002 election as one of those that she would say may have been rigged. I'll nominate the election that Stacey Abrams was in, but her lieutenant governor in Georgia is a very important, it's got more importance than in most states. It's a very, very important state officer. The woman that was running, Stacey was running for governor, the woman who was running for lieutenant governor ended up with a race where it appears that about 127,000 votes were missing. What we're looking at in this graph is traditionally, we see drop off in the ballot as you go down the ballot from governor down to commissioner of labor. But look at the lieutenant governor's race. It took a very deep dive, but then returned for the rest of the down ballot races. But when we look at what happened by race, by ethnic race, what we see is something extremely suspicious. Here's what we would typically expect to see. This happens to be a white, highly Republican county. You see a little drop off in all the precincts, a little drop off as you go down the ballot. This is what you would expect to see. But let's look at what happened in heavily Black precincts. Here's a heavily Black county, Hancock, with 71% Black voters. Look at the lieutenant governor's race compared to the other races. The one more white precinct didn't have nearly as much dip. Morgan County, Jean Dufort's on with us today from Morgan County. She's the one who discovered this. They have one heavily Black precinct, Northeast Morgan. Look at the depth of which, what this means is that Black voters were not voting this race. It's not because the Black voters didn't vote it. Something was programmed into the machines. It had to be. When we look at the hand-marked ballots from these same counties, the mail-in ballots, as Barbara said, Stacey Abrams did a great job in getting out the mail ballot vote. You don't see this dip. So it wasn't like this woman was somehow unpopular.
Yeah, with this, I want to get now to the auditing, and we can come back in the second half of the call, but this is the perfect point to jump off into why audits are so important. So I'd like to welcome Lulu Friesdat, a filmmaker and the co-founder of Smart Elections. So Marilyn, do you want to stop sharing your screen? And
Ooh, if I
look
can
forward
figure
to
out
hearing
how,
more
I
at the end.
will.
I can also, you got it. Okay, great.
So Holly, you don't want me to show a film clip? You want me to just talk about the audits?
No, you can show a film clip too, but I think just since that was such a great jumping point where like, you know, an audit would then be able to go back and see if something was going on with that one race dropping off. I know I've witnessed audits here in LA and Norwalk, and you see them actually auditing each race. So please do share both, yes.
Okay, I'm going to show a film clip, which I hope maybe ties together some of what Barbara and Marilyn were talking about. This is actually 20 years old. I actually made this in 2000, well, not quite. I filmed this in 2007 about the 2004 election. And what's really sad is that these problems are still with us. They really have not changed that much. It's very entrenched. And I think it's really important for us to kind of think about how, you know, think out of the box, how we might try to tackle them now in the coming 2024 election. So I'm going to show a clip of, you know, Barbara talked about that one election in 2002 in Georgia, that if there was any election that she thought was rigged, it was that election. I'm going to show a clip of Alex Halderman. He's one of the world's top white hat hackers. A white hat hacker is somebody who's sort of hacks for the good side. And this was him when he was in grad school, actually demonstrating how to hack that very machine that Barbara was talking about that was used in 2002 in Georgia. And then it goes on to show a recount and audit, and how the audit actually clearly demonstrated that there was a problem when this machine was used in a different state, in Ohio. Actually, there were a variety of machines used in Ohio, but the concept is still the same. This is still an electronic machine, and it's still talking about programming. So I think that's enough of a setup for the clip. And
there's a lot at stake. Control of the, we have had election fraud. There's a lot at stake. Control of the American government, control of the economy, control of the military. When there's a lot at stake, there's an incentive to fraud. The difference between our history of fraud and computerized fraud is that with computerized fraud, you can set up a program that basically gives you the number of votes you need, switches, deletes, adds, without leaving a trace. Computer professionals pretty much agree that the system is tremendously vulnerable.
I'm Alex Halderman. I'm a graduate student at Princeton University.
I'm Ari Feldman, and I'm also a graduate student at Princeton University. My interests are computer security and technology policy. This machine has two locks, one that covers both the power switch and the memory card slot. And the memory card slot is really all that's needed to introduce malicious software on the machine.
All someone would need is access to one of these machines for 1 minute.
Alex over here, who has modest locksmithing skills, is able to pick it in under 10 seconds.
That was very hard. This machine has already been infected with our vote stealing software, and there won't be any signs in the pre-election testing that the machine is infected. Now we're ready to run our election. This is the race for President of the United States. The candidates are George Washington and Benedict Arnold.
They walked me through the election.
And so we can cast a vote for George Washington, and then press next.
I'm going to cast my vote for George Washington as well. And again, George Washington, father of our country. I think I favor him over most notorious traitor. And all right, so
now we have 3 votes for George Washington?
That's right. The total so far is 3 votes for George Washington, no votes for Benedict Arnold. Now election day is over. We're going to end the election and print out the totals. And we see the total: 1 vote for George Washington, 2 votes for Benedict Arnold. How did this happen? Our demonstration vote-stealing software running inside the machine switched 2 of the votes from George Washington to Benedict Arnold. It switched all of the records, so there's no way to go back now and find out that the actual result was 3 votes for George.
The Diebold AccuVote TS voting machine that the Princeton team hacked is an earlier version of the machines currently in use in Allentown.
I'm Levi Price. I'm the Chief of Staff at Lehigh County.
And you were the one who purchased the new Diebold voting machines.
I was involved in the purchasing. When we looked at those, we looked at the possibility of tampering. We changed the passwords for each election.
The password didn't stop us for more than a few seconds.
One, you have to have the technological capability of altering the software.
The memory card is just a standard off-the-shelf memory card that you use in your digital camera. The smart cards you can buy over the internet.
We have 700 separate machines. Each of those 700 separate machines is locked with a different key.
You don't need to break all 700 locks. Because a viral attack is possible, all you need to do is infect one or a small number of machines. And then the virus and your malicious vote-stealing software will spread from machine to machine during normal election procedures.
But what if we had a paper trail for the touchscreen machines? Would that make them more reliable?
There is no reason to trust a touchscreen or DRE system with or without a paper trail, period. You can hack the paper trails as easily as you can the internal numbers. Matt Bishop is one of the foremost experts in the world on computer security.
Many of the vulnerabilities can be exploited in a very straightforward manner.
Meaning it's not too hard.
Meaning it's not hard at all.
Are the elections being rigged?
Yes, our evidence shows that they are.
Evidence like the 2004 presidential recount results in Ohio. Jesse Tendler was a regional coordinator for that recount.
I was in charge of about 10 different counties. Not only was there discrepancy between the hand recount and the original certified vote, in most cases there was also a discrepancy between the hand recount and the machine recount in every precinct in every county.
That's a little confusing, so let's look at it carefully. In almost every precinct he was involved in, there was a difference between the hand count and the machine count. Here are some of the differences. In Bradford Village, the official certified machine count had 3 votes more than the hand count. In Piqua 2A, the machine count had 8 votes more. Troy 3E, 14. Machine seems to be adding a small number of votes each time. But could those small changes really have mattered?
The differences are absolutely meaningful differences. Difference of 6 votes per precinct could change the results of the entire election.
So I think that's a good clip for a number of reasons, because it takes us through like different scenarios. It takes us through kind of how easy people who have computer skills can actually make changes to computer programs. And it also shows you how, if you actually do count by hand and compare a hand count to a machine count, you can find discrepancies if the machine does seem to be counting incorrectly. So it's really important to make that count. In that particular situation that the film describes in Ohio, the hand count was done, but it wasn't given any credence. It was the results were just certified, despite the fact that all of those discrepancies from the hand count were perfectly available. I think we're in a different culture now. I think that if you found those discrepancies, you might have some attention paid. Although I will say that in the 2020 hand count audit in Georgia, there were also many discrepancies between the hand count audit and the machine count. And the election officials pretty much just brushed it under the rug. They found that the same candidate won in both counts. And so there was no real investigation of why those counts were different. So a hand count audit that is robust, public, transparent, and followed up on is very, very important, because the computers can make mistakes and the computers can be hacked. And I just also want to add that the computers that we showed being used in Pennsylvania have been updated now. Many of the Pennsylvania counties are now using a hand count paper ballot system with accessible devices for those who want them. The exceptions are there's a couple large counties in Pennsylvania that are using ballot marking devices that we consider extremely risky and that experts consider extremely risky. And so those are also large centers like Philadelphia, which is a huge vote center is using a machine that experts consider very problematic. So as Barbara explained, it's really kind of a patchwork throughout the country. There's areas that we consider that are using best practices, and that there's areas that are continuing to use systems that are highly problematic. But the audits are very important, and we are going to be doing nonpartisan election observation. I do just want to make a point on this call, because I know there was some partisan information shared. Smart Elections is nonpartisan. We do not favor any candidate, and we do our work to protect the election overall. I'm gonna, hopefully by the end of the chat, I'll try to put a link in the spreadsheet and the chat to a Google form that you could sign up if you're interested in doing nonpartisan election observation. We would welcome you no matter where you are. It is going to be extremely important. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lulu. This was great. And again, yes, please, everybody share in, I'm sharing in the shared Google Doc. So please fill out your information and anywhere else, anything else you would like to share. We also, Why Do You Vote is a nonpartisan, nonprofit effort to get out the youth vote. As we mentioned, I'm just going to quickly share with what we are doing before we get back to the rest of this conversation. Just a couple minutes about the idea of our campaign and how everybody can hopefully participate, not just here, but we want to bring these messages to social media so that more people find out about this. So here we go. We are the Why Do You Vote? This is a coffee chat, which is part of what we are doing. We are a social media effort. We are focusing on 7 issues. This is one of them. 97% of Americans agree we need honest, fairly run elections open to all citizens. Of all of the issues, this is the one that has uniformity. The 3% who are not for honest, fairly run elections, that's the big problem. And that's why we need to really get this message of hand-marked paper ballots when possible and robust audits. This is so important. And we encourage all of you to join us on social media to get this message out, because we are in, people working on this are sometimes in a bubble, and we need to get this message out to young people who could care, who will care about this. So if you want to join us in writing a script, filming yourself and posting to socials, it's really easy. You just, the issues about secure elections, and you can say, I vote because I care about honestly run elections that have hand-marked paper ballots and are robustly audited. Why do you vote? And holding election officials accountable to this. It's kind of funny because the machines are often that they're pushing that are insecure are far more expensive than if we just ran the old way. So, beyond doing this social media, please do film yourself with this message. Do it with friends, get more people to do this, do a video, write your text, use Vote for Honest Elections. We have social stickers you can share, and I'll share this toolkit. But we want people, to engage in this campaign online to spread the message. And I also wanted to share, we are going to do a film challenge, a social post challenge, September 14th and 15th, which is the week of National Voter Registration Day. So please stay in touch with us and join the Spark the Vote Filmmaking and Social Action Challenge, where we want to engage with people across the country, online and in-person events, to spread this message. So get a few friends together, make some videos on this weekend and post it so we can really encourage people not only to vote, but to vote for secure elections. So with that, I want to get back to the programming, but that's what we are about. And that stuff will be, all of this will be in the chat. But now I would love to get some questions, or people, Barbara, if you wanted to continue with more, we still have 20 more minutes to go deeper. But let's get outside of our bubble and spread this message.
I just have two quick slides, and the main one is what we were just talking about. So if I could just show that one, because it
That'd be great.
summarizes what we're saying.
Perfect.
So
Looking at my bookend nicely.
yeah. So the solution, what's one of the things that's very frustrating about this work is that we know we have a solution to have transparent, accurate elections, and furthermore, if we do this right, I believe it's the best and perhaps only response to the whole Stop the Steal movement. All the effort to increase voter denialism is to be able to demonstrate that our elections are truly accurate and secure and reflect the will of the people who vote. So what we need are voter marked paper ballots, ideally hand marked. The ballots produced by the ballot marking devices for voters with disabilities and others who need it are also voter marked, but we really want to minimize those. We want to focus on hand marked paper ballots. And something we haven't mentioned yet is strong chain of custody of those ballots. So that's really, really critical because the ballots then need to be used. The reason we want paper ballots is that we want to have statistically sound, and Holly was just saying this, I mean, this is something that we all agree on, statistically sound, manually post-election ballot audits to check on the computers that count these ballots. As I say, you know, typically now they're scanners, but scanners are computers, and just like any other computer, they can have mistakes or have malware. So we need to use the ballots, the paper ballots, to check on them. And something I really want to emphasize is no internet voting. Over half the states in the country have some form of internet voting, typically for a small number of voters, typically for military overseas voters. But in a very close race, a very close election, especially in a swing state, that could make the difference in the outcome if those ballots are rigged. And we really don't have a way of protecting ballots cast over the internet. So again, if you go to the verified voting website and click and check on the internet voting issue, you'll see a chart of all the states, and you can find out if your state allows any kind of internet voting. If it does, please, you know, one of the things you could do is to try to discourage people from allowing it, you know, get involved with the politics of it and fight back against internet voting because it's fundamentally insecure. And since I think there are quite a few Democrats on this call, I want to point out that a lot of the push for internet voting is coming from Democrats because they believe that internet voting, some of them believe that internet voting will increase voter participation and is a way around voter disenfranchisement. There's actually not really good evidence for either, but whether or not that's true, it's just too insecure. So the final slide is just, oops, that's not the final slide. This was the final slide. Okay, so this is the solution, and this is something that we need to pay attention to, as I think we made clear. So I will now stop sharing.
Thank you. And we have a couple of questions. So I want to get to the questions we've had so far. And I'll just read out a bunch and then we can address them. So Chris asked, are there any states doing effective audits? And let's see.
So Colorado and Rhode Island both have risk limiting audits. I'm not sure if there are other states or not. Does anyone know if other states are doing it? Risk limiting audits are the gold standard of post-election ballot audits. That they were developed by a statistician at UC Berkeley named Philip Stark, and also Ron Rivest, if those, you know, for you computer scientists on the call, and with very high probability, if you have a risk limiting audit, you'll either be able to confirm that the declared winners, in other words, the ones declared by the voting machines, by that do the tabulation, are correct, or you will find the correct winners. And that's what we need to do. And again, I think that's the best way to fight Stop the Steal.
And then we had another question from Mark Carlin. Do paper ballots include where you vote on a machine, but get a paper printout at the end that you then put in a voting box? That is the case in Cook County, Illinois.
And I had answered that in the chat by saying that in Cook County, that is the BMD set up exactly the same one that Georgia has. And as Barbara noted, people don't review those ballots. We know this with many different studies. People don't review those ballots. So it's almost as if the paper doesn't exist almost, because it is not a verified by the voter. What's there is what's marked by the computer, not what is intended necessarily by the voter.
I want to talk a little bit about the audits, Holly. I think it's really important that we drill down a little bit on the audits. So I totally respect Barbara's opinion about the risk limiting audits, and that I think most academics agree with her and are pushing for risk limiting audits. I personally have some reservations about risk limiting audits. One, in terms of their implementation. Although I think statisticians and academics understand them, I think the general public does not understand them. And so we've had people like Carrie McKim from Wisconsin Election Integrity, who did a lot of work on citizens audits and working with the public to, try out different types of audits. And what she said in her experience was that the risk limiting audit, although it may be accurately verifying the audit, it did not do as much in terms of public opinion, because the public in general didn't understand what was happening. And so when they were working with citizens groups demonstrating different types of audits, they developed a really interesting type of audit that's very fast, where the ballot is actually projected up onto the wall in a room. So everybody in the room can see the ballot. And then people in the room have little clickers, and you have several people clicking for each candidate, and you can go through the ballots very quickly. You can do like a batch of 50 and see, did everybody get the same results? And if so, you write those down and you move on. And it's a very public form of auditing, and it's very basic. It's like, here's the ballot, we're counting the results, and you go through, and maybe you do a risk limiting audit, but you also randomly select a number of precincts where the full precinct gets counted, like in public, in a very transparent way like that. That is a type of audit that tends to increase public confidence. So there's a number of different types of audits. And then, as Jean put in the chat, RLA, as long as you have a trustworthy ballot. So it is the opinion of experts, including the expert who developed risk limiting audits, that if you have a ballot that is created by a computer, which is like the kind of, the ballot marking devices we're talking about in Georgia, or somebody mentioned Cook County, it's not a trustworthy audit. It's not a risk limiting audit, because you think about what you're auditing. You're not auditing the voter's intent. You're auditing the computer's intent, because the computer created that ballot. So when we're auditing, this is something Carrie McKim said over and over again, you have to really think about, what are you auditing? Are you auditing the correct thing? And that's why experts really lean toward hand-marked paper ballots with assistive devices for anybody who needs them. Because as Barbara said, when a voter is filling out that ballot with their own hand, they're verifying it at the same time that they're filling it in. So that's their intent. You are actually auditing voter intent. So I hope that clarifies things a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because this topic, because it's so diverse across the whole country with all of the systems, like some people say, oh, that's the strength. But it's also like, if we can be clear with our messaging that, always that we need hand-marked paper ballots when possible with robust audits. And then at the local level, people can, fight out. But if we can at least get that and talk about the expense of these crazy machines that are making it hard to audit, could somebody actually speak about the cost difference? Because that is something politicians listen to when you're talking about budgeting and these machines. I'd really like to add that to the conversation while we have time, because
I'm going to nominate Jean DeFort, if she will, to talk a little bit about what Georgia has experienced. Can you give it 2 minutes, Jean?
Yeah, so in a state that is super proud of its fiscal conservancy, Georgia Republicans lost their minds when they forced this new system on us. In Fulton County, our largest county, they have a lot of municipalities, so they're required to keep very careful records of what their cost per voter is. And the cost per voter, since we implemented the current machines for all, I call it machines, we went from 27,000 devices of DREs to 100,000 devices when we brought the BMD system in. And their cost per voter went up something like 4 times. I haven't looked at the stats exactly lately, but call it that. So that's the local cost. Now, the cost of acquisition, if we had transitioned to a hand-marked paper ballot system, we could have done that for under $30 million for the entire state. We wound up spending more than $150 million for the entire state as a state expense to convert to this. And it gets crazier. We put a 20-year bond. We financed it with a 20-year bond on equipment that is already wearing out after one full election cycle. So it's just don't trust your normal instinct that you can make an economic argument and politicians will follow it. The power of having an electronic voting tool that you may have some control of the outcome undiscovered turns out to be a much more powerful argument than fiscal conservatism, I would suggest.
Thank you for sharing that.
Holly, I'm just going to share this document. This shows in New York, we're fighting the same battle. One of these touchscreen voting machines is $12,000. A pen, if you buy them in bulk, 26 cents each. And then you have to buy so many more of these machines. So one of these touchscreen machines can serve 450 to 550 voters. A hand-marked paper ballot system can serve 4,000 voters per machine. So you're really talking
10 times, almost 10 times. 9
yeah, and it's a little bit less because the touchscreen can serve 450 to 550 as you get into the second one, but you're really talking about maybe 5 to 6 times as many machines. And that makes sense in terms of the numbers that Jean was talking about. That's how you go from 30 million for a hand-marked paper ballot system to 150 million for a touchscreen system, because the machines are more expensive and you have to buy a lot more of them.
And plus the lines.
I was going to say,
you might be
also,
waiting in
yeah,
line.
election day turnout at individual precincts can vary a lot. So despite people's best effort to be prepared, you can wind up with lines that are bottlenecks simply because of machine availability, when a pen and a clipboard gives you infinitely expandable capacity when voter turnout is high.
Right. And on another call, we'll talk about voter disenfranchisement and how they sometimes where do they put the machines or the polling places and accessibility, voter suppression. So we have like 5 more minutes. So is there any other questions or points that people think are important to talk about today? And I just so appreciate this deep conversation and all of our guests and all of our participants, because I think this is such an invaluable conversation.
Holly, may I show what we saw this past weekend? And Jean's been working on it too. Okay, let me see if I can pull that up. Let's see, share screen, shoot. Well,
while Marilyn is doing that, I just want to, again, reemphasize internet voting, because we haven't talked about that very much. That really is a big threat to our elections.
Do you have any good articles to share in our spreadsheet there? And again, please, everybody add any information to our spreadsheet that you'd like people to be able to have after this call. And then go ahead, Marilyn.
I'm having trouble sharing my screen, but I'm going to give it one more try. Let's see. Let me just explain for a really quick a quick minute that what happened is just one more example of why we need a new generation of warriors to be working on electronic snafus that go on in elections. What we discovered, and Jean was a big part of it, as was Eileen, who I think is on this call, and Catherine on this call. What we discovered was that millions of Georgians had been sent an electronic message on their My Voter page by the Secretary of State saying that they were eligible to vote in next week's runoff, where this week early voting started. And it was untrue. Many of them were not eligible to vote. Then they were given sample ballots that they could pull up. Many of them were seeing sample ballots that they were not eligible to vote, that they assumed that they could vote based on the message. Others who were told they could vote tried to click on their sample ballots and they showed nothing. So they assumed they couldn't vote. In other words, Secretary of State, because of what we assume to be just human error misprogramming, has misinformed millions of voters about their eligibility to vote in the runoff that is coming on Tuesday, but early voting started yesterday. My plea for people beginning to understand more about all the things that can go wrong in complex electronically driven elections where there is not enough security calls for a lot more attention to the entire area. And it is a very difficult area that we've not figured out the answer as to how activism can best work. And so I'll just leave that very big question out there in terms of how do we move the concepts of voter protection to a much bigger issue where there are true unmitigated risk.
And I will just encourage people again to sign up for the nonpartisan election observation. We are putting together a strategy that we hope will be in many states around the country, especially swing states, but in many states, that includes actually training people to go into the polling place and check if the number of people who sign in actually matches the number of ballots scanned, taking photographs of poll tapes, see if those poll tapes match the election results when they are presented, online and in, the certification process. Also taking screenshots of election results as they come in. We have seen instances where as election results come in, a candidate's totals might actually go down instead of up. So we have teams that screenshot that. And then we also have coordinated efforts with data experts looking at where historically there seems to be some sort of anomaly and making sure that those areas are getting more focused and getting that information out to the public. If things go well, a well-trained team that is on the ground verifying election results can boost confidence, very important, can reduce chaos, can reduce people's frustration and their feeling like they need to be violent. So this type of observation, it's actually, some of it is the type of observation that we do in other countries, but it's really, really important that we do this here. And if this interests you and you think you might want to be involved and get trained for this and be part of a team doing this really important work, there's a lot of people on this call that have been doing this work for decades, and we're going to be coordinating with them, and we would welcome you. Please do sign up on the link. I put it in the chat, I put it in the spreadsheet, and we will have it at our website at smartelections.us. There will be a sign up sheet there to sign up to participate in election observation. Thanks so much, Holly.
Great, thank you. And we had two more quick questions. Mark Carlin asked about universal mail-in ballots, which I think is a great idea that happened here in California, and we just saw such great, it's nice to, because that's a paper ballot, the mail-in ones. And then also Allegra asked about the new machines in Georgia, or the new law that passed to ban the type of voting machine that is being fought in New York with the barcodes. Is that?
May I take that one really quickly, Holly?
Yeah.
Allegra, sadly, no. That was that PR was way overblown. All that bill did was say you can't use barcodes starting in 2026, in November 2026. However, it was so poorly written, nobody really even understands what it does require, and it's unfunded. So it was just a PR move and nothing substantive, I fear.
Okay, and then John Brakey added a 19-minute video that I'm putting over and a link to the Pima County Board of Supervisors, what's happening with the Arizona audit. So I'm adding that to our spreadsheet. Again, one last time before we end our call, please, everybody, let's continue this conversation and stay connected so that we can bring in, do the stuff on social media so we can bring in new young voters to the cause, get their amazing computer brains, social media savvy to join our efforts on this very important issue. And I just thank you, Barbara, Marilyn, and Lulu, and everybody on the call. I know is also, you're doing your part in many ways, which I so appreciate. And thank you. Unless
Thank
unless
you, Holly. Thanks so
everybody-
much for hosting this.
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you, Holly.
All right.